My diamond ring was gone. The one my husband placed on my finger 51 years ago on a cold November morning when we were both too young to understand what forever meant. I noticed it the moment I returned home from the hospital. The small velvet box I kept on my dresser was open and empty. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom still wearing my discharge bracelet, still smelling like antiseptic and recycled air, and I understood with a clarity that had nothing to do with grief that someone had been in this room while I was lying in a hospital bed fighting to breathe. My name is Virginia Calloway. I am 74 years old, and I live in a small brick house in Columbus, Ohio, that my late husband Bernard and I bought in 1987, when the neighborhood still had elm trees lining the sidewalks and neighbors who brought casseroles when someone was sick. Bernard died 6 years ago. A stroke, quiet and sudden, the way he always moved through life. He did not suffer. I tell myself that often, because it is the only comfort I have been able to hold on to that does not slip away when I reach for it. After Bernard died, the house became something I maintained rather than lived in. I kept his chair by the window. I kept his reading glasses on the side table, even though I knew he would never reach for them again. Grief does not always look like crying. Sometimes it looks like a pair of glasses left exactly where someone set them down for the last time. I had 2 children. My son Marcus lived in Denver with his wife and worked in commercial real estate. We spoke on birthdays and holidays, and sometimes in between when one of us remembered to call. My daughter Patrice lived 40 minutes away in Westerville. She had 2 teenage children, a mortgage that worried her constantly, and a husband named Derek, who smiled with his mouth but never with his eyes. If you are new to this channel, and this story is already reaching something inside you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Every person who joins this community makes it possible for stories like mine to be heard. And leave a comment telling me your city. I want to know where you are listening from tonight. Patrice had always been the child who stayed close. After Bernard died, she came by on Sundays sometimes, brought the grandchildren, sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee. She never finished. I was grateful for the visits even when they felt slightly obligatory, even when I noticed Derek checking his phone more than he looked at me. Gratitude is something you learn to hold loosely when you get older. You take what is offered, and you do not examine it too carefully. In February of last year, I developed pneumonia. It came on fast, the way illness does when your body is no longer young enough to argue with it. One morning, I was tired. By afternoon, I could not walk to the kitchen without stopping to hold the wall. By evening, Patrice had called an ambulance. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed watching the paramedics come through my front door and thinking that Bernard would have hated all this fuss. I was admitted to Riverside Methodist Hospital on a Thursday. Bilateral pneumonia, the doctor said, significant fluid accumulation, monitoring required. I was 74 years old, with a heart that had already been through 6 years of grief and a body that needed time. They told Patrice I would be there at minimum 10 days, possibly longer depending on how I responded to treatment. I gave Patrice my house key so she could water my plants and collect my mail. That was all I asked. Water the plants, collect the mail. She had a key because she was my daughter, and I trusted her the way you trust the people you brought into the world. That trust, I would learn, had been functioning as an open door for a very long time. The hospital days blurred together the way they do when you are ill enough that time loses its shape. I slept in intervals. I watched the ceiling. I listened to nurses change shifts and the particular silence of a hospital at 3 a.m, which is unlike any silence you will find anywhere else. My roommate was a woman named Gloria, who was recovering from hip surgery and who told me every detail of her grandson's school play in a voice that never quite dimmed. I did not mind. Her voice meant I was not alone. Marcus called twice. He offered to fly in, and I told him it was not necessary, that I would be home soon, that he should not upend his life for a chest infection. Patrice visited every other day. She sat beside my bed and reported on the plants and the mail and small neighborhood news, her voice calm and reassuring. Derek came once, stood near the door, and left after 12 minutes. I counted. On the 8th day, I started to feel like myself again. The oxygen numbers improved. The doctor spoke about discharge planning. I began to think about my own bed and my own kitchen and the specific comfort of a space that knows you. I called Patrice to tell her the good news. She seemed pleased. She said she would make sure the house was ready. I came home on a Tuesday afternoon in early March. The weather was gray but dry, and the elm stumps along my street still stood like small monuments to what the neighborhood used to be. Patrice drove me home, carried my bag inside, made tea she did not stay to drink, and left within 20 minutes saying the children needed picking up from school. I stood in my living room for a moment, just breathing the particular air of a place that is yours. Then I went to my bedroom to unpack my bag. And that was when I saw it. The velvet box open on my dresser. Empty. I did not move for a long time. I stood holding my hospital bag and looking at that open box the way you look at something that cannot be what it appears to be. Then I opened the dresser drawer where I kept a small cedar box with the rest of my jewelry. Bernard had given it to me on our 30th anniversary. Inside that cedar box, I kept what remained of my life's accumulation in small, beautiful things. My mother's pearl earrings, a gold bracelet Bernard bought in New Orleans the year we drove down for our anniversary and got lost twice, and laughed about it for a decade. A sapphire pendant my father gave me when I graduated nursing school in 1971. A strand of graduated pearls I had worn to every important occasion of my adult life. The cedar box was still there, but it was lighter than it should have been. I carried it to the window and opened it in the afternoon light and counted. The diamond ring was gone. The gold bracelet was gone. The sapphire pendant was gone. The pearl strand was gone. What remained were the smaller things. A silver pin Bernard's mother had given me, a pair of modest gold studs, a watch with a cracked face I had been meaning to repair for 3 years. What was taken was what was valuable. Someone had known exactly what to look for. I sat down on the edge of my bed and held the cedar box in my lap and did not cry. I was past crying. I was somewhere further along than crying, in a place that felt cold and very clear. I thought about who had a key to my house. I thought about who had known I would be away for 10 days. I thought about Patrice sitting beside my hospital bed, with her calm, reassuring voice telling me the plants were fine, the mail was collected, everything was taken care of. I thought about Derek, who had stood near my hospital room door for 12 minutes and never once asked how I felt. I set the cedar box down. I went to the kitchen. I made tea. And I sat at my table and thought about what Bernard would have done. Bernard had been a methodical man, a civil engineer who believed that every problem had a structure, and that if you examined the structure carefully enough, the solution revealed itself. He used to say that panic was just information arriving faster than the mind could process it. "Slow down," he would say. "Look at what is actually there." So I slowed down. I looked at what was actually there. My daughter had a key. My daughter had visited the house multiple times while I was in the hospital. My daughter's husband knew the value of things because he spent his professional life moving money around and watching what it was worth. And my jewelry, the pieces that were taken, were pieces whose value anyone with basic knowledge would recognize. I finished my tea. I went to my bedroom and took out the small notebook I kept in the nightstand drawer, the one where I recorded important numbers and dates and the kind of information that older people are always advised to have written down somewhere safe. I had purchased jewelry insurance years ago at Bernard's insistence. He believed in documenting everything. When we bought each significant piece, he had photographed it, recorded the purchase price, and filed the documentation with our insurance agent. His reading glasses were still on the side table, but his thoroughness was everywhere in my life, in the filing cabinet, in the organized binders, in the records that meant I could describe every missing piece with precision. I found the insurance folder. I found the photographs. I found the appraisals. The diamond ring alone had been appraised at $11,000 4 years earlier. The bracelet, the pendant, the pearls. Added together, I was looking at nearly $23,000 in jewelry that had been in my home, in my bedroom, while I was lying in a hospital bed. I did not call Patrice that night. I needed to think before I spoke. Once you say certain words, you cannot take them back, and what I said next would determine everything that followed. I slept badly. In the morning I made oatmeal and sat at the table and thought about my daughter as a child. I thought about the girl who used to fall asleep on the couch with her head in my lap watching old movies. I thought about the teenager who cried at her kitchen table when her first boyfriend broke her heart and who let me hold her until the crying slowed. I thought about all the years of ordinary love that build up between a mother and a child, like sediment at the bottom of a river, quiet and heavy and real. And then I thought about the empty velvet box. I called my attorney at 9 in the morning. His name was Raymond Holt, and he had been handling my affairs since Bernard was alive. He had written our wills, handled the estate when Bernard died, and reviewed the property documents when I had considered and then decided against selling the house 3 years earlier. He was 70 himself, deliberate and careful, the kind of lawyer who listened completely before he spoke. I told him what I had found. I told him about the hospital stay, about the key, about what was missing, and what the insurance documents showed. I told him who had access. I did not accuse out loud. I described the facts in the order they had occurred and let the structure speak for itself, the way Bernard would have. Raymond was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he said, "Virginia, before you speak to anyone in your family, I want you to do 3 things. First, file a police report today. Second, call your insurance company and open a claim with the documentation you have. Third, do not return the house key or ask for it back yet. Let me make some calls." I asked him what kind of calls. He said, "The kind that find out whether anything has been sold." I had not thought of that. The moment he said it, I understood that this was already further along than I had allowed myself to imagine. If something had been sold, there would be a record. Jewelry dealers, pawn shops, estate sale brokers. In Ohio, there were reporting requirements for purchased secondhand jewelry above certain values. Dealers were required to hold items and record seller information. Raymond knew this. That was why he handled things and I did not. I filed the police report that afternoon. The officer who came to my house was a young woman named Detective Ansley, who had careful eyes and wrote everything down without expression. She asked me to show her the dresser, the cedar box, the photographs from my insurance file. She asked when I had last seen the items. I told her November, before the hospital, when I had worn the pearl strand to my neighbor's daughter's wedding. She asked who had access to the house. I told her my daughter had a key. Detective Ansley wrote that down without looking up. She told me she would be in touch. That evening, Patrice called to check on me. Her voice was warm and familiar, and I listened to it the way you listen to music you have known so long you hear it differently now, aware of things underneath the melody you had always accepted without examining. "How are you feeling, Mom?" she asked. "Tired," I said, "still getting my strength back." "Do you need anything?" she asked. "I can come by tomorrow." I told her I was fine. I told her I needed rest. I told her I would call when I was ready for company. She said, "Of course, take your time. Just let me know." When I hung up, I sat very still and understood something that took all my strength to hold. She did not ask about the jewelry. A daughter who had been in that house, who had stood in that bedroom, who would have seen an open, empty velvet box on the dresser, had called to check on her mother and said nothing about it. Not a word. That silence told me everything I had not wanted to know. Raymond called the following morning. His voice was measured, but underneath it was something tighter. "Virginia," he said, "I have spoken with a colleague who works with the Columbus Police Jewelry Theft Unit. There is a consignment record. A gold bracelet matching your description and a sapphire pendant were brought to an estate jewelry broker in Clintonville 8 days ago. The seller provided identification." Raymond paused. "The name on the record is Derek Simmons." I held the phone very still against my ear. "The diamond ring and the pearls have not surfaced yet," Raymond continued, "but with the police report filed and the broker record, there is now a chain. Detective Ansley has already been contacted." I asked Raymond what happened next. He told me that Derek could be charged with theft, receiving stolen property, and depending on what Patrice knew, potentially more. He told me the broker was required to hold the items pending investigation and that recovery was possible. He told me he was filing a civil claim as well, that regardless of the criminal process, I had the right to pursue the full value of what was taken. He asked me if I wanted him to be present when the police spoke with Patrice. I said yes. The call came to Patrice from Detective Ansley 2 days later. I was not there for it. Raymond had advised me to stay home and let the process move without my presence, that my being there would make it about emotion rather than evidence. He was right. It was already about emotion for me. It needed to be about facts for everyone else. What I know of that conversation I learned afterward from Detective Ansley and from what Patrice eventually told me herself. Derek had gone to the broker alone. Patrice had known. She had not taken anything with her own hands, but she had given Derek access to the house, had described what was there, had looked the other way while he gathered it. She told the detective she thought it would only be 1 or 2 pieces. She told the detective they were behind on the mortgage by 4 months. She told the detective she planned to pay me back. She told the detective she did not think I would notice right away. She did not think I would notice. 74 years old, recovering from pneumonia, and my daughter believed I would not notice that my husband's ring was gone from its box. Derek was arrested on a Thursday. The charge was felony theft. Raymond informed me that a plea agreement was being discussed, but that the civil claim I had filed would proceed regardless. The estate broker had confirmed the sale of the bracelet and pendant. Those 2 pieces were recovered and returned to me 6 weeks later in a small box delivered by Detective Ansley, who set it on my kitchen table and told me she was glad we got them back. The diamond ring and the pearls were not recovered. Derek had sold them privately. Raymond pursued the civil judgment for their full appraised value plus damages. That judgment was entered 3 months later. Whether I ever collect on it is a separate matter. What mattered to me was that it existed, that somewhere in the official record of things, it stated clearly what had been done and what it was worth. Patrice called me 3 weeks after Derek's arrest. She had hired her own attorney. She had moved into her sister-in-law's house with the children. She had filed for separation. When she called me, her voice was stripped of everything practiced. It sounded like the girl who used to cry at the kitchen table, only older, worn through. "Mom," she said, and then for a long time, she did not say anything else. I waited. I had learned patience in the months since the hospital. Patience and the particular strength that comes from knowing exactly where you stand. "I did not know he was going to take all of it," she said finally. "I thought it would just be 1 piece, to cover 1 month, and then he would stop." I asked her how long she had known Derek managed money the way he did. She was quiet again. "Long enough," she said. I asked her why she had not come to me. She said she was ashamed. She said Derek told her I would use it to interfere. She said she believed him because it was easier than believing what it meant that she believed him. I told her I understood shame. I told her shame was not the same as guilt, and guilt was not the same as being beyond repair. I told her that what she had allowed to happen had broken something between us that would take a long time to rebuild, and that I needed her to understand that clearly before I said anything else. She said she understood. I told her that I loved her, that loving her did not mean forgetting, that loving her did not mean the locks on my house were not already changed, and the key that had been hers was already gone. That loving her meant I was still willing to be in the same room with her as long as the room was honest. She cried then, quietly, the way adults cry when they are not performing grief, but actually feeling it. We have spoken several times since. The conversations are careful. They have edges, but they happen, and I have learned that careful and honest is more valuable than warm and false. Derek accepted a plea arrangement, 18 months of supervised probation, community service, mandatory financial counseling, and full restitution ordered by the court. Whether the restitution comes is uncertain. Courts can order things that reality does not always honor. But the order exists. The record exists. My attorney made sure of that. I had the bedroom repainted in the spring, a soft, warm white that made the light different in the mornings. I moved the dresser to the other wall and bought a new velvet box for what remained of my jewelry. The cedar box Bernard gave me I kept, but moved to a different place, somewhere chosen by me rather than habit. His reading glasses are still on the side table. I have not moved them. I do not think I will. One afternoon in May, I sat in the garden Bernard planted the first summer we lived in this house. The tulips he chose came back as they always do, indifferent to everything that had happened, pushing up through cold ground, because that is simply what they do. I sat among them and thought about what it means to be old and alone and still here, still capable of acting, still capable of protecting what is yours. I had thought that age made you smaller, that the years accumulated not as strength, but as fragility, that the world moved faster and you moved slower, and eventually the gap between you and your own life became too wide to cross. Bernard's death had confirmed that fear in ways I was still untangling, but I had called my lawyer. One call. 74 years old, fresh from the hospital, standing in a bedroom that had been quietly robbed by people I loved, and I had called my lawyer. And that one call had started everything that followed. I want to say something to anyone listening who is older and who has felt that smallness, who has stood in a room and sensed that something was wrong, but doubted themselves, because the world has spent so long telling older people that their instincts are just anxiety, that their concerns are just confusion, that their needs are just inconvenience. Your instincts are not confusion. Your eyes still work. Your mind still works, and the law does not require you to be young to use it. I gave my daughter a key because I trusted her. I would not give that key back because trust was broken. Those two things can both be true. You can love someone and still hold them accountable. You can grieve what you lost and still protect what remains. You can be 74 years old, recovering from pneumonia, standing in a bedroom with an empty velvet box, and still be the most capable person in the room. Bernard used to say that integrity was just honesty that had been tested enough times to become a habit. I think about that now when I look at his glasses on the table. I think about all the years he modeled what it meant to deal with difficulty quietly, precisely, without theater. I am still learning from him. Even now, even without him. The tulips came back this spring without being asked. And so did I. What lesson did you take from this story? And which city are you watching from right now? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.